Wow, that was pretty powerful moments there. That was the first moment of silence, marking the moment the first plane hit the first tower. The memory of one of New York City's finest, bravest, I should say, lives on through the Talented Towers Foundation.
Stephen Siller ran through the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel to get to the World Trade Center with 60 pounds of gear, even though his shift had just ended, ultimately giving his life to save others.
His brother, Frank Siller, has spent every day since ensuring his memory lives on. And Frank joins us right now, along with Pete Hegseth from Lower Manhattan. As we watch the commemoration, it was 23 years ago this hour. Frank, I know this is a terrible day in your family's history. And we just watched the big video that showed what led up to that first plane hitting the towers and what happened afterwards. But when we go to commemorations like this, as soon as I hear the bagpipes just take me back.
Well, yes, Steve, it does, for sure, and it is very emotional. You know, at 8:46, the North Tower was hit, and I didn't even know it at that point. I was waiting for Stephen to come home from his night shift in Squad 1 in Brooklyn, and with my brother Russ, with my brother George, we were going to go play golf. And soon thereafter, my brother George came in and said, "Turn on the TV." And soon after, I saw the South Tower hit, and I started to gather my family together at my house because I knew this was something very, very bad going on. And at 9:59, I remember it like it was yesterday, my mother-in-law had already come up to my house. My siblings were starting to come over. And when at 9:59, when the South Tower came down, I turned to my mother-in-law and I said, "Nancy?"
Terrence Edward Adderley Jr. Sophia B.
I think I just lost my brother. Not knowing how he got there, not knowing that he ran through a tunnel with his fire gear on his back to get there, but I knew he would get there because I knew my brother. And so many others that paid the ultimate sacrifice that day, and that is why our foundation will always pay respect to him and to all those that made the ultimate sacrifice. And our first responsibility is to make sure we never forget. And America is watching today. Now, I live it every day, and a lot of people in our foundation live it every day, those who gave their lives and those who gave their lives ever since that served us overseas. But I'm glad America will stop today and not forget the sacrifice that was made 23 years ago.
Pete, I know you fought for our country. You've lost friends who have fought for our country. Take us back to that day for you and some of the stories you've heard when you were fighting.
Well, you know, I was, like many Americans, naive to the threat that loomed across the globe and that was lurking in our own country when those hijackers laid their plans. I was horrified by what I saw. Like everybody else, I remember exactly where I was. I was a sophomore in college. It was amazing to read the accounts and the stories of the men like Stephen Siller and so many others who ran up burning corridors with smoke-filled rooms and floors, pulling people down in sheer desperation, people jumping from buildings. It was almost too much to calculate and to understand in that moment. But then I watched a generation of guys and gals, many of which knew nobody from Manhattan, for Staten Island, from New Jersey. They didn't know the Sillers, they didn't know any, but they were fellow Americans who said, "I will sign up, I will enlist, I will go on behalf of this nation because our country was attacked." And the first people to respond, Frank, were, well, not just the first responders here, but the Todd Beamer and the folks on Flight 93.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was the first counter-assault against radical Islamic terrorism on 9/11, and I am heartened today when I think back on the 20 years of war, even with the way that it was horrifically handled and finished in Afghanistan, the courage, the fortitude, the commitment to this nation of a generation of men who went overseas willing to give their own lives to get retribution for what was done to 3,000 innocents and 400 first responders here in New York and in Shanksville and at the Pentagon. So we can set aside the politics and what worked and what went right and what didn't go right. I'm grateful we live in a nation that can muster the collective courage of of young warriors that would go on behalf of those who lost their lives to try to say, never again will this happen. And I pray that we do never forget. I fear that all the work Frank does is so central to making sure we don't forget. But I see the kids walking to school today, Frank, here in Manhattan, and I want to make sure they're being taught firsthand what a great country we live in, and then also what kind of threats lurk in this world that seek to do us harm, and we need to raise a generation willing to stand up to them.
Frank, how have you seen this event over the last 23 years? First there was rubble, then it was cleaned up, then there was designs of buildings to be built, then a memorial to be assembled, and now as you look back these 23 years, can you talk about how we marked these ceremonies all these years as everything evolved and got back on its feet downtown?
Yeah, it's remarkable. I mean, right behind us is the Freedom Tower. You look at that, we have a climb every year. We go up that tower, 102 stories, 2,226 steps. Why do we do it? To make sure we don't forget. And think about all the stories that happened in the stairwells on 9/11, and we want to tell those stories, like Captain Billy Burke that told his company, go ahead, I'll catch up with you later. And he stayed behind with somebody that couldn't make it down the stairs, knowing that the South Tower already collapsed, and he was in the North Tower, knowing he was going to give up his life. I'd like to say that so many men, Tunnel to Towers Foundation, and our commitment to our first responders, and most certainly to our veterans. And our veterans, because we went to war, what happened on 9/11, and that's why Tunnel to Towers Foundation's promises that we're going to take care of every catastrophically injured service member and Gold Star family that lost their loved one that left behind a young kid behind, and give them a mortgage-free home. And we did 20 mortgage-free homes today to show that goodness will always triumph over evil. So the question is, how is America doing after 23 years? I think a lot of people care. I know a lot of people care. The people that I come in contact with care. But we have a curriculum right now on our website, K through 12. Go to t2t.org, and you could download age-appropriate lessons on the stories of 9/11. And we have a mobile exhibit that goes all around the country with 9/11 artifacts. So we want to make sure that we never forget. Not just today, but every day.
And of course, you can go to t2t.org to donate as well. And we only play that video of the towers collapsing once a year because hundreds of people died instantly when that happened. But Frank, you know better than anybody, the reason your brother and the other firemen were going into that building, running up the stairs, was the fact that in 1993, the first time the World Trade Center was attacked, there was an explosion, there was a bomb downstairs. The towers did not collapse. And that is why the fire department was telling everybody, stay at your desk, somebody's going to come and rescue you. And that's why what happened 23 years ago was so different than anything we'd ever seen.
Yeah, well, it wasn't hit the first time by a plane full of fuel, for sure. And to think of the fire line and those who were stuck above the fire line and the choice they had on that day to, I hate to say it, but people have to realize they had a choice to burn or jump. But yet the fire department got up to the 78th floor. Chief Oriole Palmer and his band of brothers made it up to the 78th floor to get right at that fire line to try to save others. What went on that day? Yes, it was such a sad day in America, but it was a beautiful day in that all the acts of heroism and courage and selflessness that happened that day. But yeah, we didn't know the towers were going to come down. But after the first tower came down, they certainly knew the second was going to come down. They did a Mayday, but the firefighters still stayed inside because there were people and they were saving the people inside. And I just can't believe the courage to do something like that, knowing that you're probably going to die. I know firefighters that were hugging each other and before they went into the building, and they weren't saying, I'll see you later at the firehouse, or we'll see you this weekend coming up, or whatever maybe. They were saying goodbye. They were saying goodbye because they knew it was a strong possibility they weren't going to be surviving the day. You think about that, and you think about the greatness and the goodness of America. And I think everybody should stop and say thank you for the sacrifice that you made.
And
You know, I would just add, I know that in a military context, when you're out on a mission, you have those thoughts of, okay, we're going on a mission, will we make it back? And it's another thing, though, when 45 minutes earlier or 90 minutes earlier, it was just a regular day in Manhattan. And suddenly now these guys are throwing on gear like Stephen, and they're going up those stairs. I remain today in awe of that courage. We ought remain today in awe of that courage of our firefighters and our police officers who put those uniforms on for all of us every single day. They're the first line of defense for us. Shame on us when our first instinct is to condemn or to criticize, when what they do for us is give us a quality of life and show up in those moments when no one else will show up.
It's also pretty amazing to see, you see former President Trump, you see soon-to-be former President Biden, Vice President Harris, and J.D. Vance all basically within feet of each other on 9/11. And just keep in mind, I know you know this, Frank, 28 lost their lives in 9-related illnesses already this year. 370 have lost their lives. More than lost their lives that day because of the carcinogens in the air.
Yeah, so you're right. More first responders have died after 9/11 than they did on 9/11 from 9/11 illnesses because they were on the pile digging through the rubble and the soot and all that, you know, looking for my brother, looking for their lost brothers and sisters that were serving on the department, looking for civilians that just died that day because they went to work. No, it's incredible. Of the 20 mortgages that we paid off today, 7 of them are those who've died of 9/11 illnesses because we don't forget about them either by any means. And they are the forgotten ones because we all talk about on 9/11 the 2,977, but there's been thousands that have died afterwards.
You know, Pete, for all of us that were alive through this, we remember where we were that day. You two gentlemen were handling the coverage that morning when this was all happening. But Pete, you were saying earlier there were some kids that were trying to get to school and the streets were blocked off and they were having to take detours. And you look at these individuals that are reading the names right now and they're so young. It just reminds us that some people were not alive. And to hear that you can go onto t2t.org and get materials so we can teach our children. What's your advice there with your experience?
It's our jobs, parents and grandparents. Frank's doing his job at the macro level. It's what are you doing at your household level, in your community level, at your school level, in your church, to remind the kids and grandkids that freedom is not free and has to be defended. A day like today is a perfect day to start doing it.
Amen to that.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.